Welcome to Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson. This is the podcast dedicated to first responder mental health, helping police, fire, EMS, dispatchers, and paramedics create better growth environments for themselves and their teams. Let's get started.
And just by magic, we're back and we're wearing the same clothes. It's always the same joke I make, but hey, I'll get a new one soon, I'm pretty sure. I want to talk more about peer support because what you made as points is having, a good clinical support system, having the right person and the right team in place. And I know we got to walk some lines. I don't have to walk a line. I'm a civilian. I've never worked in the field, but I've been there long enough. I've been embedded in teams. One of the biggest complaints that I hear from other people is there's some of the peer support people get to, we already have problems with people gossiping. And now you go see the peer support person, and lo and behold, now your captain, your DAP, your chief all know that you're having a problem with XYZ. I think that that's the other thing that I wanted to mention. I know that's not what you were saying. This is what Steve is saying, and I'm an individual. How do we address that? Because there's a lot of teams that are like, they want to be able to go to their peer support person or persons or people, but then sometimes because they're embedded with telling the chief or whoever what's going on, how do we deal with that?
Yeah, there's actually a quote that's in my peer support book that's coming out that says, sometimes we don't want to talk to a person because we don't know them. Sometimes we don't want to talk to a person because we do. And so it really does highlight that if we know a person is not going to keep their mouth shut, like the reputation of one is the reputation of all, right? And that's whether it's peer supporters and oftentimes clinicians, and that's not right. It's just how it is. And so, I have actually worked, and I'm going to be really careful here. I've worked with agencies where we've scrapped an entire team and said we go back over and we start the nomination process and the screening and the application and screening process all over again, because we want the best people in there. And then in terms of damage control, and I've had this conversation with peer coordinators and the supervisors that kind of are doing kind of program management, not the peer team per se, but program management. Like, so how do we even recover from that? And I said, we have to do what they do in hostage negotiations, is we have to do an accusation audit, which is to say, we're going to we know that the confidentiality of our people has been in question, and we are aware of what you are aware of, right? And we take that seriously, and we are taking great measures to ensure this is done well. And so that's what we do. I mean, that's what you do, is you actually have to name. And just like if someone comes to me as a clinician and they've had a clinician prior to me fall asleep on them or cry in the session or do their dumb shit that they tend to do, I have to typically pay for the sins of the people that came before me, unless they come to me through like a known referral or something like that, and they know me, is I just go, you can say what you need to say and it stays here, unless these, very narrow things. And I'm not going to cry or fall asleep on you. So peer supporters may have to actually do that same kind of thing, is just like be very transparent and just say there are, these 4 exceptions, depending on your state. There are these 4 exceptions. And, but I also am aware that others did not adhere to that before. And I'm not here to, talk smack about somebody else, but just to acknowledge, I know or I can imagine what your concerns are. And it concerns me too. It's like saying, only person that hates a bad cop, or no one hates a bad cop more than a good cop. No one hates a peer supporter that runs their mouth any more than a peer supporter that takes the role seriously. And even saying that, right, can be incredibly important. And then again, weeding out, and and the confidentiality piece is part of it. The other part of it is, what if the peer supporter is nominated, screened, trained, dialed in, goes through 2 or 3 of their own personal or professional traumas or gets into some stage in life because they've changed assignments or have a health issue, a family thing, or whatever, they need to have the emotional maturity and insight to be able to say, you know what, peer support was great for me at one point. It's not great for me now, which means it's not going to be great for the people I'm peer supporting. I'm going to hit the pause button. I care enough about how much I show up in this role. I'm going to hit the pause button. When I get this thing kind of in my rear view mirror, I'd like to hit the play button and come back on. And agencies and teams should allow for that. And if the person doesn't self-identify, hey, it's time to hit the pause button, then the team lead or coordinator needs to be able to say, hey, Bob, you haven't made it to any of the last call outs. It seems like you've missed a certain percentage of the training. So this doesn't seem like it's the right time for you to be on the team. Again, no hard feelings. Your assignment changed, or your shift changed, or your family situation changed. How do you feel about pausing or just leaving the team for now until the situation changes and you can return and give it the effort that I know that you're committed to, like I'm mentally committed to, maybe not like opportunity committed to. And I think that's how we keep, or one of the ways we keep that team healthy.
Can I play devil's advocate here for a second? I like to throw a little grenade on here.
Oh, please.
So one of the things that I've observed, and correct me if I'm wrong, saying that I have to put a pause on any role in the fire, police, corrections, dispatch is a sign of weakness. If for those of you on video, you'll see me do the quotes here, but it can be perceived as a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
What do you say to someone who might say, "Oh, I don't want to look like a pussy"? I'm sorry for the language if it offended anyone, but that's what the language would be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's actually, yeah. And I take that one I tackle that question all the time. I think it's a sign of ignorance to not recognize your capacity. I think it's a sign of both intelligence and integrity and purpose. And I think it actually calls for a lot of strength to say, I got to prioritize something else right now. Right. I think it speaks volumes for people in a very positive way to do that. And I think if someone looked at a peer and, on the peer team and said, well, that peer team member is weak because they hit pause or they stepped out of the team, they should actually probably go because they're not embodying what anything that they're trying to preach, if you will. I put quotes on mine to somebody else, right? So the hypocrisy of a peer team member saying, hey, if you need to take off time for yourself, take off time for yourself. If you need to take a pause for this or that, do this and that and the other. But for them not to do it for themselves there's no other word that sums it up better than hypocrisy. And nobody aspires to be a hypocrite, which is why I said earlier, I'm no perfect by no means, but I try to truly do what I would suggest someone else do so that I'm not hypocritical. Right? It's an integrity issue.
I think that to me, that's exactly what we need to do. Sometimes we need to be able to put pause in our own stuff and say, wait a minute, I need to stop. I think it happens to me recently. Had a few hospital stays and scares for my own health. So I had to put a pause on seeing as many clients as I was. And I was afraid a little bit, I'll be honest with you, about people's reaction. Truthfully, and again, 70 to 80% of my clients are first responders in some way, shape, or form. All of them said pretty much the same thing. Steve, I need you to be alive. So don't worry about this. Go take care of you. Because I'm not saying my story again. I don't want to repeat my story. You know my story. So I think that giving that message to people is so key about the hypocrisy. If you're telling people, take care of you, and you're like not taking care of yourself, or worse, you turn to substances, which is not what happened to me. It's just my health kind of like collapsed. I think is so important. So I really like what you say. And I think that you're right. I think the hypocrisy sometimes is hard for people to hear, but that's the truth. The other thing I will say is I do a group twice a week. I think that my group that I run, one of the things I say is there are two rules in my group. What says in my group stays in my group. Do not
Hmm.
repeat it to anyone else. If I hear of it, I will cut you. No questions, no explanation. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
The second rule is do not apologize. Because one of the other things that I find, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that sometimes you'll go to a peer or a therapist. Oh, I'm sorry to bother you with these things. Is that the fucking point of it? And
Yeah.
getting them to talk about it is key. So I tell people you can't apologize. And it's funny because the group members now that I have a good number. As soon as someone says I'm sorry, they're down their throat, stop apologizing. They yell at them, and it's kind of funny, but it really helps them think about it differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
let's shift gears a little bit again. I want to talk about your book because, again, like I said, I really highly recommend it. This is the one I have. This is the second
Hmm.
edition. I don't want to cover the mic. Increasing Resilience in Police and Emergency Personnel. I really recommend people go and grab it. Therapists and first responders. I think that that's so important for people to do. But maybe we start with that one, and I would like to talk more about your peer support book too, because that
Hmm.
would be great.
Yeah.
But if again, I know it's going to sound sales pitchy, but at the end of the day, it's kind of what I wanted people to understand. So if I said to you, why should I get this book? I mean, I'm in the East Coast. What would someone from Arizona, Texas really understand about the shit I do?
Yeah. Well, this book is like anything I write, is I'm always standing on the shoulders of giants. So while I have my own experience, I'm also have the experience that comes from in anonymous ways or aggregate ways from first responders. I conducted the research in three different studies, and they were from people from all over the place. And in the studies, the results of those studies are in there. And then the part of standing on the shoulders of giants is I looked at what is the research out there nationally mostly, but some international, that relates to resilience in the first responder world or could apply that I could translate to the first responder world. So some of these universal concepts that I could say, how do we fine tune this to this population? Because, and I think you said it earlier, when there's suggestions, or maybe it was a different conversation. There's suggestions to maintain a sleep schedule because the sleep experts say that, or to do this or to do that. But that's not feasible for a first responder given shift work and all those other kinds of things. I'm taking some of those recommendations and saying, how does this work with a first responder? Right? How does this work given the realities of shift work? And so why should they get it? Because I have taken a lot of this information and wrote it in such a way that it's approachable, right? I write like I talk. There's profanity in there. There's even a couple of times when my editor said, "Do you really mean to say this?" And I was like, "Yes, it's jargon. Leave it in there." Right? Yes, that's what I really mean to say. And while there's differences in the way that we talk geographically in certain terms, all I've ever gotten as far as feedback goes is it resonated with me, right? And that's across the first responder disciplines.
Just a quick break. Guys, I'm going to talk about a new product that I really like. I actually bought one of their hoodies. It was amazing, and I really enjoyed wearing it. This episode is going to be supported by Deemed Fit. Deemed Fit is a first responder-owned activewear and leisure brand. And one thing that I genuinely like about them is that they support different causes. I actually gave a few people I know who work with first responders or nonprofits their name to Deemed Fit, and I know they're talking to them. They do a lot of initiatives and collections that are based on mental health for first responders. And if you go there right now and you buy anything, including the mental health support stuff, use the code RDA15. That's right, RDA15 to get 15% off on any products that you get. Again, it's called RDA15. Go to deemedfit.com, DEEMEDFIT.com, and enjoy 15% off at checkout to save. Now, right back to the episode. I would also say that it resonates with me, and I'm on the East Coast. I know I'm a civilian, but I know it resonated with some of my guys because I definitely use some of the stuff you talk about. One of the
Mm.
things that I also like is how you build every chapter. And what I think that people need to understand, maybe you can explain more of your thought process. I kind of know what you're going to say, but I'd like to hear it from
Okay.
you. But like you write it up about what you're talking about, then you talk about family members and tool for your duty bag. And I think that
Yeah.
that's just a great structure for every chapter. And maybe you can tell them more about your thought process behind that.
Well, I think there are times, and I've had lots of people say this to me, they're like, I want the takeaway. I want to, like, what's the tools, right? I can, to me, it's really kind of a three-part thing. What are the signs that you might have something going on or something might be presenting in a peer and your family member or whatever, your subordinate or that kind of stuff? What is the science? And when I say science, I mean the plain language, none of the psychobabble bullshit, but just like why. And the reason why I give the science is I want people to understand that most, if not every single symptom, every single sign, if you will, has a survival mechanism, is a survival adaptation, right? So that's why I want people to understand the science. And then the science also gives a rationale for what comes next, which is the strategies. And the strategies are, okay, so now we know what it looks like. Now we know why it is that way without all the stigma bullshit that goes around the weakness and, I'm tore up from the floor up and whatever, what have you, but rather really kind of recognizing it as to why we would have such a response to something and then why we would want to do something. Because some of the recommendations, if you don't understand, because we get these tired recommendations like eat well, right? Have a balanced diet. And you're like, and our association with that is that, oh, well, that's about our waistline or aesthetics or our heart disease or something. And those things are important, or the heart disease and waistline perhaps are important. But really, if you understand that nutrition has, contributes to the gut biome, which contributes to inflammation, which contributes to serotonin production, which is our mood chemical. So there's real tangible reasons why we would choose certain foods that are going to have magnesium in them because they're going to help us sleep. They're going to have more of a calming effect versus something else that has MSG. And I love MSG. I heard it stands for make shit good, and I get that.
It
But
is
it's
what it
also
is.
excitatory and it causes us to be more keyed up. Right. And so, so the method to my madness is, can we understand what we're looking at, why it's happening in a non-pathologizing, let's label first responders as strong people, not weak people. And then what are we going to do about it? And the tools for your duty belt is, here's the gist of what you need to get from those kind of three kind of overarching themes.
And I've had the conversation. I know I think you mentioned in your book that gut that's bigger. Sometimes it's not only the food; it's the cortisol levels you have in your body because of the work you do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I had someone have this kind of aha moment last week because she's like, I don't get it. You know, eating pretty good. I'm trying to eat really well, but my stomach's just getting bigger. But I'm also talking to my doctor about this and that and the hormones and stress and not sleeping. And why would my stomach get bigger? And I was like, food is energy and energy is, or is calorie and calories is energy, but you're not expending the energy. And like, so where is it going to go? Right. And stress and, our blood sugar goes up and you start getting, yeah. She's like, oh my God, that's why, that's why. Oh, she just connected the dots for her. And I was like, okay, good. But again, even in the book, it's not when I talk about nutrition, that's just one example. There's many others. But again, I think when people can understand some of the whys around some of the recommendations and find, hey, gosh, if I just make a really small change, I don't have to overhaul everything, but if I can make a small change incrementally, I'm going to get a little closer to where I want to be. So that, like, just for life, for quality of life, but then if you have a critical incident, you're standing on more solid ground to not be knocked over by it.
And I think that the other part too, when you talk about growth, and let me know what you think, but I always quote Mr. Bessel van der Kolk, who says
Mm-hmm.
growth is not like this. It's not exponential. It looks weird and it's these wiggly
Mm-hmm.
lines and it goes really
Mm-hmm.
until you get to where you want. And then there's going to plateau and sometimes you're going to go up and sometimes you're going to go down. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's the other part too that I feel people don't quite understand about therapy or whatever you decide to do. Oh yeah, you're going to be better after one session. You should be done
Yeah.
after that. Of course not.
Yeah. I think it's page 2. Here's what
Yeah.
progress looks like, right? It's this horrible squiggly line.
So it
It's
was
all
you
over the
too.
place, right? Yeah. So and that was, I actually, that's the, there it is, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the thing is that I tell people, oftentimes if you've gotten into habit of avoiding stuff, then yeah, you might get some relief because you're avoiding something, but that relief is temporary. And then when you go to actually address something, just like if I went to address a knee injury, and I'm like, oh man, I'm going to actually start physical therapy on the knee injury, then there's going to be some inflammation and swelling the first few physical therapy. I don't go, oh my gosh, I think they're making it worse. I say, oh, I have some stuff going on in there that I'm needing to do some work on. And that's what's interesting about people going to counseling or having open conversations with peers is it sometimes lets them know that knee is a little sore when you get to moving it, and that approaching that conversation about that thing you're trying to avoid kind of makes it psychologically sore for a little bit until it doesn't. So
I appreciate you. And like I said, Bessel does it well. The Body Keeps the Score. If you ever want to read that, that's great. I don't recommend it to
yeah,
everyone because it's a little heavy duty to read, but it
yeah.
is absolutely essential for therapists, if you ask me. How about we shift gears and talk about the other book now, the peer
Yep.
support, the one.
Yes.
I'd like to hear more about that. And you said, like, I think pre-interview, we talked about how that one came out of you almost like bleh, came out right away.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a brain dump, but in a positive way, because as I mentioned in my prior portion of the episode, I was a peer supporter, and then I went on to become a clinician that worked with peer teams and was doing occupational wellness stuff for another agency. And so I was always looking at and researching what how are peer teams helping, how are they not helping, what are the most effective ones. I got pulled into the peer support guideline committee and became an ICISF instructor years ago, and have been teaching peer support and thinking about peer support. So when and I talked to Dr. Jack Digliani, who's a peer support expert in Colorado, and he's done some studies on some of the few studies that we actually have on the effectiveness of peer support and some of the recommendations for starting and maintaining them. And so, but in looking out there, I was like, man, there's just so much more to explore. And so many people have so many questions. And I'm always being asked questions from peer teams and from agencies. And it's almost a weekly, if not multiple times a week, someone asking me how to start a team or maintain a team or how to restart one. And just like the first book, I was like, man, I have something to say. And instead of answering it here and there and just kind of putting it behind closed doors in this agency or in that other place, I'm just going to put it out there. And so it took me, and it just like the first book, still standing on the shoulders of giants and reading, Jack's work, Dr. Jack Digliani's work, and other people's work and research where it is. But then a lot of the research on what they're doing in different states. But it was coming out of me just lightning fast, because it was just like just a free flow of ideas, because I had been thinking about it and writing about it and reflecting and training on it for so many years, that it was just a matter of organizing it to be usable, to be a real tool box for teams, for agencies, for clinicians, because a lot of the questions actually come from clinicians, right? How do we do this, right? I'm on this, being asked to be on this team. What are the best practices around this? So
And I think that that's what we need to sit on. We all sit on the shoulders of giants. If you think that everyone that does anything on their own vacuum, I think is absolutely absurd. That's
mhm,
why, like I said, I did a presentation at the FOP. It was well received, but it was based on some of the work you've done. And I can talk about other people, but Kevin Gilmartin is another guy that I really think
mhm.
highly of, who gave me great ideas. I did an interview with him a few months ago, but I never know everything, and I never will pretend. And that humbleness of the great people that I've met is exactly that. Once you're humble about not knowing everything, you actually know more than you think you do. So tell me, so the peer support book, is it out, or is it going to be out, or can I go buy it right now? Where can I get it?
Yeah, it's coming out, I think August 26th. The publisher will surprise everyone and they'll launch it beforehand and I'll find out afterwards. But I've been meeting all my deadlines to get certain things approved and, typesetting and whatnot. So hopefully they'll get it out before that. But you can pre-order it on Amazon right now. The pre-order through the publisher at Routledge will be, I think, August 6th, but I think it's going to be available for pre-order on August 26th on Amazon. And then, as always, as an author, I get my allotment usually a month before everybody else does. And so anybody that orders directly from me that's in the continental US, contiguous US, then I'm able to take pre-orders and send them to them. And so, yeah, so all I have at this point is the card that says it's just the QR code for pre-order. And that just gives me the shorthand of what the chapters are, how I ended up organizing the content. So
What I'll do is in the show notes, I will be putting it in on your author Amazon thing. So that
yep,
way, when it shows up, it'll be right there so people can go and order it. We'll put in your website, which is
firstresponderpsychology.com.
and that way people can pre-order from you. I know
Yep.
I'll be in line to get that. Probably won't be able to get my signed one face to face, but nonetheless would love to see you again.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to start with all my guests, and is always this has came up from another podcast that someone I listened to that's not related at all to first responder stuff. But I always thought it was a great thing, and I'm going to try to put it in my podcast. I don't know who my next guest is. I do have a list, but I can't tell you off the top of my head. That's what I'm saying. If there was one question I should ask about my guests, and you don't know if they're law enforcement, you don't know if they're fire, you don't know if they're just therapists or clinicians,
Yeah.
what would be the one question you think everyone should ask and be able to answer?
What is your why?
I like that.
Right. Yeah. Because I think when we have that why, then that drives everything else. And when we lose sight of that why, that's when we get things like compassion fatigue in whatever role we're playing, right? Because we have lost sight of our compassion satisfaction, why we're doing what we're doing, what purpose it offers us. And I mean, I tell that to other clinicians that I train, I tell that to peer supporters, to clients who are first responders. Yeah.
Well, what I'm going to do, I think that the next one I have is someone who works in the law enforcement field. So I'm going to ask them that question, and I'm going to ask the next person to ask a question. I think it's a fun thing to do, and that way it's kind of a continuance of stuff. But from the bottom of my heart, Stephanie, I really enjoy your book. This is not my audience knows I don't tell people like I like this because I just want to say stuff. I did really enjoy. I got it twice, obviously, and I hope people go and get it. And I really want to thank you for your time. And hopefully at one point in time, we'll meet again at some conferences and even come back on the podcast.
Yeah, sounds great. I appreciate your time, and hope to come back.
You will always be invited. So thank you. And thank you to my audience, and come back for the next episode.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.